Bills running back James Cook is among the biggest dynasty winners from Week 16. We'll explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. On today's show, we're taking a look at the biggest winners and losers from Week 16. So, of course, Kate, we have to start with Cooper Rush and the Dallas Cowboys. No, never mind. We don't. But
wrong show, Marcus.
Yeah, wrong show, but that'd be really fun. Let's talk about James Cook, who once again had a big performance for the Bills. Not only was he their leading rusher, 11 carries for 100 yards and a touchdown, was also their leading receiver, 3 catches for 26 yards and a touchdown. Kate, he has scored a league-high 16 touchdowns this year. That was our biggest concern about James Cook coming into the year, and he continues to absolutely smash the season.
He has had a touchdown, at least one in all but 4 games this season, including 5 different games of multiple scrimmage touchdowns. And I mean, the heater he's been on as of late, incredibly impressive over the past 4 weeks. He's had 3 outings of 120 plus scrimmage yards and a score, at least one, back-to-back weeks with multiple touchdowns. Like, for a guy who, that was kind of our big concern, right? Josh Allen with those legs, he's definitely going to steal some of those goal line touchdowns, which he has, but not enough to keep James Cook out of fantasy relevance. And I mean, I think we have to look at the fact that, like, the way that this offense is constructed, it doesn't run through any one person outside of Josh Allen. But if you had to come up with one guy who it did run through, I think it'd be James Cook at this point.
Yeah, I mean, he's just the perfect player to pair with Josh Allen because he's an explosive runner. He can make plays as a receiver. You can use him in the slot if you need to. And I think the Bills are doing a good job of giving him consistent work every week, like 14 touches this week, 15 touches last week, 15 touches against the 49ers. Like, he's consistently involved in the offense, but they're not overworking him either. And I think that's why you're seeing some of his best football late in December, is because they have used Ray Davis and some of the inside runs. They've used Ty Johnson as a receiver. They're keeping him fresh, and he's providing the Bills a bunch of explosive plays. And yeah, maybe he doesn't have the week-to-week touches to be a RB1, but if he's going to score 16 touchdowns every year, Kate, he's going to perform just as well as basically every other running back in the league, not named Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry. If you have James Cook on your fantasy teams, you got to be thrilled right now.
For sure. And it's kind of interesting because we actually are seeing like a decrease in workload. We're actually seeing fewer targets per game, fewer rush attempts per game. But the efficiency is making up for it, as is, of course, the ability to score touchdowns. He is averaging a full rushing touchdown per game over the course this season, which is just absolutely ridiculous. So let's talk about his dynasty value, because obviously, this is kind of the first time we're seeing this type of upside for a player like James Cook, but we knew he was explosive. We knew he had draft capital, which can be a good indicator of, a team's commitment to you, or maybe, some more of the forgiving nature if they're, if it takes a little while to heat up. Like James Cook, he's 25, like you said, hasn't necessarily been overworked. I mean, this is a guy that, to this point through 3 seasons, 605 total touches from scrimmage. Like, I don't know. I'm starting to look at him with like some fresh eyes, considering just how efficient he's been, and just with the knowledge that like this is a guy that might have a decently lengthy career who
Yeah.
doesn't have a ton of miles on the tire. Like he's looking more appealing by the week.
Let's go to some other winners this week. And Jaden Daniels, obviously on the list, threw for 5 touchdowns in this game. Also ran for 81 yards against one of the NFL's best defenses. Jaden Daniels has already been somebody who's being valued as a top 3, top 4 dynasty quarterback. So you're not moving him really at all based on this one game. But it just shows you the upside that he has. And with the Commanders having so much cap space and going forward, and a bunch of draft picks, I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes quickly a destination for other players around the league. Jaden Daniels, I think, not only this week, but this season, one of the biggest winners.
I mean, yeah, for sure. And again, like the stats obviously super impressive, but I think what was more impressive just from like a dynasty perspective, obviously like you can have flashes in the pan, but the poise, the total calmness, despite the fact that like yes, this was a unit that was turning over the ball, like it just felt like they couldn't catch a break. But Jaden Daniels didn't skip a beat. He looked like a true franchise quarterback, which when's the last time you remember looking at the Washington Commanders starting quarterback and saying that looks like a franchise guy? Like it was
2012 when they had RG3. And I think he would have been if it wasn't for the knee injury. But it's been over a decade.
it's been a long time, and I have to imagine that the team is feeling pretty good. I have to imagine the fan base is pretty good, but I also think that dynasty managers, like after seeing that again, not even just looking at the box score, but just seeing the way he carried this team in this game, it feels like it's not a flash in the pan. This isn't just padding stat production. This is a guy that's emerging as a true leader, who I think is seems to carry poise beyond probably what anybody would have expected from him, especially as a rookie. Um, I think Jaden Daniels, the real deal. And yeah, you can make a very good argument that he's QB2, QB3, I think at
Yeah.
the lowest right now.
QB3 at the very, very lowest. I've got one more guy that I want to mention as a winner. I'm hoping that nobody watched this game because it was atrocious. Raiders, Jags. Um, it was another great game from Brock Bowers, 11 catches for 99 yards. Okay, here are his recent games when he hasn't played with Desmond Ridder: 11 for 99, 10 for 140, 13 for 126 and a touchdown, 10 for 93. Like you just even give Brock Bowers a below average quarterback and he's going for 100 yards every single week. I cannot wait until he gets a functional quarterback and a functional offensive coordinator. I'm getting closer and closer to just putting Brock Bowers inside my top 10 overall players in Dynasty. I would have no problem at all if you spent a top 10 pick in your startup drafts on Brock Bowers, because I think he's just that much better than every other player at his position.
And again, we've talked about, why did the Raiders decide to draft a tight end 13th overall when they had just drafted Michael Mayer, who, has seemed like a really promising tight end prospect? It's because they're not planning to utilize him as the tight end. They're planning to make him a focal point of their passing offense. And there's that reason, like that reason alone. He was, arguably out of the pre-draft process, the third best receiver just in general in this class, let alone at the tight end position. Like just cover up tight end, and you're looking at a guy that ranks eighth in receiving yards in the entire NFL. He is tied for the second most receptions among all players this year, as many catches as Amon-Ra St. Brown and CeeDee Lamb, only ranked behind Jamar Chase. I mean, Brock Bowers, he's already shattered the rookie reception record for the tight end position.
Mm-hmm.
He's about this close to breaking Mike Dicta's receiving record for yardage. He is already having a historic rookie season. And I do think you can make that argument. Like you want to just, cross off your tight end position for the next 10 years, have at it.
All right, Kate, let's talk about some of the biggest losers coming out of week 16. And unfortunately, one of my favorite players in the NFL is on it due to an injury. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. If you love watching the game, you're going to love PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy, whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports. PrizePicks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away over $30 million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, PrizePicks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. PrizePicks, run your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Okay, let's talk about some of the biggest losers coming out of Week 16. And this one really sucks because this is, longtime listeners know, this is one of my favorite players. Tank Dell had a big game, 6 catches for 98 yards and a touchdown, including in an unbelievable touchdown grab. But we learned today he has a dislocated knee, a torn ACL, among other ligament damage. Just such a bummer for such a young player, such a good player, such a young player. And it seems like his entire 2025 season is now in jeopardy.
Yeah, I think super unfortunate, especially because I had a feeling coming out of the Houston Texans late bye that we might start to see that, explosive playmaking ability from Tank Dell again. He's looked a little bit slow coming out of a season-ending injury last year, also was shot over the summer and came back from that, both lower body injuries. And I genuinely think, I mean, as of the game, was looking incredibly much like his former self. So to have this injury at that time, at any time, really not, it's absolutely devastating. And you mentioned because of the complicated nature of what this knee injury is, because of the timing. I mean, let's remember we're in late December, and a lot of the times that we're looking at, some of these injuries, like we'll say 9 to 12 months for an ACL. This was more complicated than an ACL. We definitely have to, I think, probably plan to be without Tank Dell in 2025, which leaves us to wonder, what is his value in Dynasty? It took a huge hit here. Obviously, first and foremost, just hoping for a full recovery because he is an ultimately talented player who can create separation and short yardage like nobody's business. We want to see that Tank Dell back on the field at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later. But given the fact that we're probably not going to see that Tank Dell back on the field for a year and a half,
all I know is like J.K. Dobbins, I believe, suffered this injury as a rookie in 2020, earlier in the year, didn't play his entire next year. Like that happened, not too far into his rookie year. I would be shocked if Tank Dell played next year. Now you're talking about a receiver going into his final year of his rookie contract. I've got to believe that Houston's going to draft somebody next year to potentially replace him. And you wonder like what Tank Dell is even going to look like now after suffering multiple lower body injuries. It just sucks all the way around. Unfortunately, from Dynasty perspective, you're talking about somebody who at one point was the top 25 receiver. I don't see how we can be a top 50 receiver at this point. It just bums me out to even talk about it. In fact, I don't want to talk about it anymore. It's sad.
It is sad. But again, wishing him like the fullest of recoveries, because this is a player that we know has all of the talent in the world. We just hope we're going to be able to see that come back to fruition sooner rather than later. But yeah, you're right. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I think we kind of know that this is a player that if he's on your roster, probably just going to have to hold him and really hope that we get some awesome miracle back and he's back sooner than expected. Among those other losers that we need to talk about. Should we acknowledge the Zach Charbonnet implosion? Because I was coming into this week thinking that after some really solid production that we've seen from Zach Charbonnet in the absence of Kenneth Walker, that we were going to see a bit of a split backfield. It wasn't. It was the Kenneth Walker show. He had 8 targets, 8 receptions, suddenly coming back to that full PPR relevance out of nowhere. And Zach Charbonnet, he was announced with the starter, but that didn't amount to much. Like,
not only was he announced as a starter, he was announced as a captain for this game. And it's like, okay, he's going to be
what a joke.
one carry in this game for -1 yards. I guess I just come back to like Charbonnet is only going to be valuable when Kenneth Walker's out. And whenever Kenneth Walker's healthy, Charbonnet cannot come anywhere near your starting lineup. Maybe something will change this offseason. I think if Kenneth Walker gets a contract extension, Charbonnet's value completely tanks. Maybe they trade Kenneth Walker and try to pick up some draft capital. There's just no way that you can feel good about Zach Charbonnet's long-term value as long as Kenneth Walker's on the roster, just because they clearly like Walker significantly more.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest lesson learned here. I think there was kind of this, world that we kind of envision. All right, maybe we see a bit of a timeshare and they use this 1-2 punch at running back. That's not going to be the case. It just so happens that maybe now Zach Charbonnet has taken over the role as like most valuable backup, which is not a player I necessarily am super excited about unless I happen to buy low and get to enjoy the fruits of that labor at some point.
All right, last one before we move on. You and I were joking before the show. We can't make every show about Brian Thomas Jr., but he continues to post massive numbers. Meanwhile, Marvin Harrison Jr. does not. Kate, do you know the last time that Marvin Harrison Jr. has more than 60 receiving yards in a game?
It was a while ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, October 27th was the last time. This game against Carolina, 4 for 39, including a couple drops. There were a couple of contested catch plays late in that game that they needed him to convert, and he just didn't convert. I'm not panicking on Marvin Harrison Jr. At the same time, if I had Brian Thomas Jr., there's absolutely no way in the world I'm flipping him for Marvin Harrison Jr. at this point.
I mean, I think you'd be silly to and even there was a missed play here, a big drop that could have had an even more incredible day from Brian Thomas Jr. And we've actually seen that, I feel like, a few times over the past several weeks. It still feels like despite this massive stat line that we've seen, there's still stuff left on the field that could have been beneficial to our fantasy lineups. I have to imagine coming into 2025 in redraft leagues, we have to be looking at Thomas as a first round pick. I think Thomas is very, very nearing himself to, the status as a top 5 dynasty wide receiver. And I think you probably could make the case. And again, I don't know. I think all of these guys are still in a very similar tier for me between Brian Thomas, between Malik Neighbors, and yes, even, with Marvin Harrison Jr., but like,
it's rough. It's rough out there. How many receivers right now would you take over Marvin Harrison Jr.? Like, can I just give you some names?
Yeah.
Jackson Smith and Jigba play together.
I still think I'm going to, man.
I would take Marvin Harrison Jr., but it's getting closer by the week.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, Garrett Wilson.
I'll take Garrett Wilson.
I'll take Marvin Harrison Jr. Rashee Rice.
Oh, easy. Marvin Harrison Jr.
Okay. Drake London.
Marvin Harrison Jr.
Okay. So we're not panicking too much. Just I think,
yeah,
he hasn't been a complete disappointment. By the way, he's got 700 yards and 7 touchdowns, but we just haven't seen the spike weeks from him in a long time.
Yeah, it's definitely felt bad, especially when you see all of these outstanding rookie performances elsewhere. Brian Thomas Jr. definitely not cushioning the blow here for Marvin Harrison Jr. managers, but I still think believe in the talent, believe in your evaluation until give it a moment. Let's take a beat.
Take a breath. I think it'll be okay. Let's see how things go. Let's do some buy or sell on a couple big time performers from Week 16, including Bryce Young. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here. Unfortunately, my Cowboys won't be making it, but that's okay. It's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250, in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on futures. You can still go out and bet on who you think is going to win the NFC West, the NFC South. Kate's AFC North is still up for grabs. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Go check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Kate, let's do some buy or sell. We'll do some rapid fire names here. Bryce Young, another strong performance. He was the highest graded passer in Week 16 via PFF and QBR. Are you buying Bryce Young?
I think I am. The good news is you don't have to pay up for Bryce Young costs. The offense is looking up. I think you gotta go in. We're seeing some wheels. Gotta appreciate that nice rushing touchdown we saw. I mean, yeah, I'm digging it because I know I don't have to rely on him as my QB1.
Yeah, and I think once they do a better job of adding some receivers this offseason, which I think they will, they're finally starting to get some of the assets back after making the trade for Bryce Young. I think Dave Canales just has him playing with a bunch of confidence, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see in year 3 him take a big step. So I'm buying it in the sense of I think Bryce Young is going to be a starting quarterback for a while. I'm not buying him as like a top 12 fantasy quarterback or dynasty quarterback, but we know how valuable it is just to have a starting caliber quarterback in these super flex leagues. So for that sense, I am buying it. Couple more. Anthony Richardson completed over 50% of his passes, Kate, against the Colts. Against the Titans, 7 of 11 for 131 yards. Did throw an interception on those 11 passes, but did run for 70 yards and had a touchdown. Are you buying Anthony Richardson here?
Marcus, help me. I can't get on board, and I'm really struggling.
Sell.
Okay, thank you. Permission to sell.
Yeah. Permission. Okay. You can only attempt 11 passes against the Titans because the Titans are bad. But once the Colts start playing better teams, which is not the rest of this year, their schedule is terrible. They play the Giants here next week. You're going to get exposed, and I think they know that. That's why they're trying to design a game plan that limits everything that Anthony Richardson can do. I don't see how he is their week 1 starter in 2025 unless he gets a lot better this offseason.
Yeah, I think the type of football we're seeing him play is kind of a testament to how they feel about Anthony Richardson. And that's a bitter pill to swallow for how much they invested in him from a draft perspective. But yeah, I think we got to pump the brakes. And as we talked about last week, that Dynasty price climbed pretty high. He posted, despite the fact that I'm not a believer in the performance, 21 fantasy points here just this past week on 131 pass yards. If I can sell off that asset while I have an opportunity, and maybe it doesn't look as bad because the fantasy scoring is there, I'd rather get him off my roster.
All right, next one. Buy or sell the Falcons with Michael Penix now at quarterback. Not Michael Penix, the dynasty asset, because I don't think he's going to be somebody that we overvalue too much, but just everybody else on the offense.
I'm buying. And I loved to see how the offense was clicking. even the interception from Michael Penix yesterday, about as good an interception as you could technically throw, because it wasn't on him at all. That was just Kyle Pitts blooping the ball up into the air, and it was an unfortunate turnover. But we saw the ability to score points. We saw cohesiveness and balance, I think, on all fronts. He throws a really pretty football, and I think that is going to be huge for players who are already supremely talented in the NFL. Like, I'm buying.
I mean, it was just so obvious, Kate. Like, hey, the vertical passing game is back. Darnell Mooney, 5 for 82. Drake London got a little bit banged up in this game, so he didn't finish the game, but 5 for 59 in the first half. Like, they had a vertical passing game. Bijan Robinson scores 2 touchdowns. They scored 34 points. We should say that the defense got multiple takeaways, so the offense didn't have a ton of possessions. But yeah, I think I'm buying this offense going forward with Michael Penix. I'm just a lot more excited about their ceiling now that they have a quarterback that, can throw the ball.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, I don't feel like I had a full appreciation for how bad Kirk Cousins was actually looking until we saw a quarterback in the same offense with the same weapons. And you just saw that whole situation juxtaposed so fiercely. Like,
No.
it was a stark contrast between the two. And I think that, Drake London and company have to be pretty excited for what they saw from their rookie quarterback yesterday.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. We will be back tomorrow to break down, hopefully, a good Monday Night Football game between the Saints and the Packers. We'll see. I've got my doubts. Go follow us wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Modjuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.